Hello friends, in my previous series of lectures I discussed about various classes of plant secondary metabolites, and in that I discussed about their properties, their distribution in plant kingdom, their classification, how they are biosynthesized within the plant, and how you can extract those secondary metabolites from the plant matrix. Then we also discussed about their different uses with suitable examples. So now friends, in the recent past we have observed a significant increase in the demand of medicinal plants and their products, and this is largely due to their potent biological action, and they are considered more safer in comparison to allopathic medicine. And we have discussed that the biological activity or the therapeutic activity of a particular plant is largely due to the presence of one or more class of plant secondary metabolites, which we discussed in previous lectures. Now, with this increased interest in medicinal plants or their products has led to substantial increase in their demand, and industries that are dealing with these medicinal plants or medicinal products. And with the increase in demand or the industries that are dealing with these plants or their products, there has been a considerable increase in the requirement of the raw material, which is always in the form of the crude plant material. Now, this crude plant material is largely, the demand of this crude plant material is largely fulfilled by the wild collection or the collection of the plants that are growing in their natural habitat without any aid of man. And such plants, they largely depend upon the environmental conditions. The quality of these plants largely depend upon the environmental conditions of that particular area where they are growing. Now, as I told you that the secondary metabolites present in the plant are responsible for the biological activity of these plants. So, we can say that the content of these secondary metabolites could be one of the parameter, rather it is one of the parameter to assess the quality of these plants. Obviously, there are other parameters also, but the content or the type of the phytoconstituents that are present in a particular plant, they largely define their quality. Now, since the parameter is largely on the content of the secondary metabolite, so if you are collecting the plant material from wild sources or the natural habitat, the environmental conditions largely govern the content. Whereas when we are cultivating a particular plant, like normal plant we are cultivating, there are numerous factors that also govern the overall growth of that plant vis-a-vis the quality of that plant. And yes, in terms of secondary metabolite, yes, the content of secondary metabolite is also affected by those parameters, by varying those parameters during cultivation. So friends, today this is what I am going to discuss, that is the factors that affect the quality of medicinal plants during cultivation and also post cultivation. Now, according to National Medicinal Plant Board, there are more than 7,000 plants that are used in folk medicine or various traditional systems of medicines, and out of those 7,000, only 50 species are there that are being cultivated to a sizable extent or in volume. Now, approximately 2,000 plants are there that are being used in preparation of Ayush medicines, and out of those 2,000, 500 plants are those that are being used more commonly, or we can say in majority of the Ayush formulations, such as Google is there or piperine is there. So this is how basically the extent of the usage of medicinal plants are there. Now, because of this increased interest, which I already told you that there has been a significant increase in the interest in these medicinal plants. So because of this increased interest, there has been a substantial increase in the demand of these plants, which has led to decrease in their population. And because of the over exploitation of these plants, more than 300 medicinal plants have been declared endangered. And out of these 300 medicinal plants, 85 species were having a high volume trade. So here you can imagine that how fast these medicinal plants are being exploited and how these species are getting extinct from our biodiversity. And few examples are Saraka, Asoka, you can see on your screen, Aconitum heterophyllum is there, likewise Rauwolfia serpentina is there, Google is there, and all these species, because of their great demand and majority of these species are collected from their natural habitat or from wild sources, they have been declared as critically endangered. So there are certain problems when you collect the medicinal plant from wild sources. Obviously we are going to discuss these problems ahead, and because of these problems more stress is now being given on the cultivation of these medicinal plants. So what are these problems? First one is adulteration. Now whenever a plant is collected from its natural habitat or its wild collection is there, the people that are employed for the collection are mostly laborers, and we know that these people are unskilled and non-technical persons. So there are more chances of getting your medicinal plant or the required plant getting adulterated with the weeds which are growing in near proximity of that plant, because they are least bothered whether they are collecting the required plant material or those people are also collecting the weed which is growing in their near proximity. One. Second is they are non-competent in differentiating the desired plant material and a morphologically related similar kind of plant material that is growing in the close proximity of the required plant material. So this is another aspect how adulteration occurs. And third aspect of the problem with the wild collection or the non-skilled labor is that they don't know the exact or the, I'll say, the scientific method of the collection of those plants. Though this kind of adulteration is unintentional, but such kind of adulteration leads to the quality issues with the collected plant material, because you are collecting weeds, you are collecting morphologically similar kind of plant with the desired plant material. So that kind of malpractice or unintentional malpractice leads to quality issues. Now such practices not only lead to the quality issues, but sometimes they also cause the safety issues in the longer run. It has been seen that the weeds that are being collected by those unskilled laborers or the people who are involved in the collection of the medicinal plants from the wild sources, such weeds or the unrequired plant material are sometimes toxic, and when they are toxic they cause safety issues, they cause allergic issues to the end users. So these are the problems that occur when you go for the wild collection. Second one is the non-uniformity of the quality of the desired plant material. Now the growth of the plant material which is growing in its natural habitat will largely depend upon the environmental conditions, because here man is not providing any aid, any kind of irrigation, any kind of fertilization for the growth of the plant. So whatever the resources they get from the environment, whether it is rainfall, whether it is light or the nutrients that are present in the soil. And we know that the growth of a plant varies when its geographical location varies. Suppose if a plant is growing in enormous amount in a particular area, the same plant material will not grow to that extent in some other geographical location, because change in the geographical location leads to the change in temperature conditions, leads to the change in the humidity conditions, and all these factors basically affect the metabolic enzymes that are involved in the metabolic processes or the normal physiological functions that are going on inside the plant, thereby affecting the overall growth of the plant. When such kind of issues occur, then we always have a non-uniform quality of the material that is being supplied. Say for example, an industry gives a contract to a person to collect, say, plant A, because that industry will be dealing in manufacturing of the products that involve utilization of plant A. So the supplier, what will he do? He will depute certain persons to collect the plant A from different areas, and when they collect the plant from different areas, those plant materials will vary not only in the content of the desired secondary metabolite, but also there could be a change in the chemical composition of that plant. So this is how basically the wild collection affects the uniformity of the quality of the medicinal plants. Then the next problem is the irregular supply of the plant material. As I told you that the plant which are growing under natural habitat, they largely depend upon the environmental conditions, favorable environmental conditions for their proper growth, and not only growth but also the content of the secondary metabolite or the desired secondary metabolite will largely depend upon those environmental conditions. So say for example, in one particular season the environmental conditions were quite favorable for the required plant, therefore we got a good yield, a good crop of that desired plant material. But after some time there was a significant change in the environmental conditions, and hence the growth of that plant material was retarded or stunted. Vis-a-vis, there was also decrease in the quantity of the secondary metabolite of that particular plant in that particular plant material, and the overall supply was affected. So this is how the wild collection also leads to the irregular supply. Next we have is the genetic depletion. Now it has been observed that the plants that are being collected from the wild sources, there has been a significant alteration in their genetic makeup in the upcoming generations, and this has largely been found due to the non-sustainable type of collection practices that are being followed during the wild collection of the medicinal plants or the desired plant material. Now during the first generation, the plant material gives you substantial amount of the secondary metabolite or produces substantial amount of the secondary metabolite, but because of the unsustainable collection practices or the stress or the physiological stress that is being given to the plant during the collection practices, it leads to slight alteration in the genetic makeup of that particular plant. Though this change occur gradually, but eventually it causes mutation in certain genes which decreases the production of the secondary metabolite, and this occurs over the period of time from generation to generation, and eventually after a particular period of time generation of that plant material occurs which is devoid of the desired secondary metabolite. So this is how the genetic depletion occur when a wild collection is being done for a particular medicinal plant, or there is a dependence on the availability of that plant on the wild sources. Next we have is the biodiversity depletion. Now this problem largely occurs in the species which are endemic, that is they are growing in a restricted area, or the species which have a slow growth rate. Many times it has seen that the endemic species which have high market volume, they are being collected irrespective whether that collection practices allows the plant to regenerate itself, that is sustainable collections, or whether you are giving sufficient time to plant to regrow for the next crop. So such kind of irresponsible collection from the wild sources or the natural habitat leads to the depletion of that particular species from that area, thereby causing a depletion or the alteration of the biodiversity of the area. Second aspect is the slow growing plant. or the plants having slow growth rate. So in order to fulfill the exhaustive demand from the industry, they don't allow that particular plant to grow properly in its natural habitat, and irrespective of its growth stage, they collect that plant material. So this also prevents the regeneration of the plant or the regrowth of the plant in that particular area, thereby causing its depletion in that area. Now, despite of these two factors, there are certain plants who have enormous market demand, such as Rauwolfia serpentina is there, Dioscorea deltoida is there, Artemisia is there. So all these plants, though they are widely distributed, they are not endemic, they can be grown across a wide geographical area, but still, because of their exhaustive demand, they have been exploited from their natural habitat, which leads to their extinction. They lead towards their extinction, and they have been declared critically endangered, which also alters the biodiversity of that particular area. So these are the few problems which normally occurs when we go for the wild collection of the desired plant material or the desired medicinal plants. And as I told you, because of these problems, lot of stress is now being given on the cultivation of these medicinal plants. So what are the advantages, or why the cultivation of these medicinal plants is now being stressed upon? First one is uniformity of the quality. So as we discussed during the problem aspect of wild collection, that during the wild collection, the growth of the plant vis-a-vis the content of the secondary metabolite or the desired secondary metabolite in that plant material will largely depend upon the environmental conditions that occur in the area where the plant is growing. So any variation in the environmental conditions will lead to the change in the growth pattern, change in the content of the secondary metabolites, and even sometimes change in the overall chemical composition of that particular plant. That leads to non-uniformity of the quality. So when we go for the cultivation of that medicinal plant, we grow the plant under the controlled conditions. We provide the conditions that are required, or the best conditions that are required for the proper growth of the plant, vis-a-vis proper content of the secondary metabolite or the chemical composition of the plant. So this is how we attain the uniformity in the quality of the material that is being supplied to the industry. That is why cultivation is an important practice. Then cultivation also allows us to give regular supply to the industry, because we are again providing the controlled condition for the growth of the plant. We don't allow any kind of environmental condition variations, because suppose we don't want excess of water to our crop, so we will provide certain cover, we will provide certain conditions wherein less amount of water is retained in the soil, or we prepare that soil in such a manner that less amount of water is retained in the soil for the proper growth of that particular plant, and vice versa. So we try to control the factors that can affect the overall growth of that particular plant material. Thereby we try to ensure that regular supply should be given to the industry of the desired plant material when we are cultivating the plant material, whereas it was quite opposite when we were collecting that medicinal plant from its natural habitat or the wild sources. Then cultivation also helps in conservation of the medicinal plants. So as I told you that the wild collection leads to genetic depletion, vis-a-vis also leads to the biodiversity depletion of certain species, endemic species, or they are the species having slow growth rate. So all these factors are being taken care of when we are cultivating a particular medicinal plant. So when you are cultivating that plant, whether it is endemic to a particular, whether it is an endemic species or it is having a slow growth rate, such kind of conditions can be taken care during the cultivation. So that this is how basically it also helps in the conservation of the species that have been declared as critically endangered or endangered. And one example I would like to share here is that of Google. Now Google has been widely exploited in Indian market because it is being utilized in numerous herbal medicinal product, and it has a special place in Ayurvedic medicine. Now because of its over exploitation, now Google plant, it is a resin that is obtained by inflicting injury on the stem or the branches of the plant, that is Comifera vitae. Now because of its over exploitation, the plant has been declared endangered, and different states in India have completely banned the wild collection of Google, and the collection of Google only from the cultivated sources is allowed. So this is one example how the cultivation also helps in conservation of the endangered species. Then preservation of natural biodiversity. Since it helps in conservation of the species, it also helps in maintaining the biodiversity of that particular area. It also helps in maintaining the ecological balance of that particular area, thereby preventing the species from getting depleted in that particular geographical area. Because since if the supply is being made through the cultivated sources, we give sufficient time to the plants that are growing in their natural habitat to grow and to flourish. Then when we go for the cultivation of the medicinal plants, then we can always employ modern techniques during our cultivation practices, which sometimes cannot be applied due to geographical constraints. Geographical constraint could be there when you are collecting the plant from the wild sources. So you cannot or you may not be able to employ certain modern techniques for collecting the medicinal plants, or for their harvesting, or for their collection basically. So modern techniques, modern equipments can be applied for the proper collection of the medicinal plants when they are being cultivated in the farm. Further, we can also apply modern techniques, irrigation techniques, for their proper growth in order to preserve or to conserve water, which is another important bioresource. And the last benefit of cultivation, last but not least, is the development. Now if a plant is being cultivated in a particular area, then the industry which is dependent on that plant will try to set up its plant in that, near that area, because it will basically reduce the freight aspects for that particular industry. Now when an industry is being set up in a particular area where that plant is being cultivated, it leads to the overall development of that area in terms of employment, in terms of infrastructure. And one of the common example for this could be the cinchona species. We know that northeast region of our country is suitable for the growth of cinchona species, and because the cinchona species are being cultivated there, vis-a-vis they are also grown there as their natural habitat. A cinchona factory has been, or quinine factory has been developed in those states, and the development of those factories has led to improvement in the infrastructure. They have increased the employment there. So we can say that cultivation of the medicinal plant in a particular area also helps in its overall development. So friends, these were certain problems of the wild collection of the medicinal plants, and why the cultivation is required of the medicinal plants, and how the cultivation helps in overcoming those problems which occur due to the wild collection of the medicinal plants. So friends, in the next lecture I am going to discuss about the various factors that affect the quality of the medicinal plants during and after cultivation. Thank you.